I really think it started like at age 3 or 4, like when I was younger. And like I remember going on some trips and I never put the pieces together. Even when I went to school, like when I was in kindergarten, I used to pee my pants, which sometimes people might, but like that's usually a sign. Like if you're like, I remember I'm like, why am I peeing my pants? But like, and I remember like this one dream I had where I was in a crib, and then all of a sudden, and I think I was at this great uncle, I was like in my crib, 3 or 4, and I saw this person coming into the room, and that was it. It was like late at night, really dark, and I just remember standing up and someone coming in, but that was it. That's all I remember, and that really I believe something happened, right? Because I have a blocked memory after that. Like someone was just coming in and that was it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. You are listening to Don't Be Afraid to Talk podcast with James. I believe if we are going to affect change, we must go back to the basic, which for me, in essence, is conversations. Talking and listening is key for growth, and I hope our stories will bring us together and we can draw inspiration from each other. Conversation will include topics such as mental and physical health, trauma and its effect, suicidal thoughts, recovery, and well-being. We will continue to raise awareness and offer a different perspective, a mindset or an idea that could inspire you to take charge of your well-being. Thank you for joining us today for another episode. Today I'm joined by Amanda, who is an author, educator, consultant and international speaker. And this is actually a second time coming back here. Thank you for coming back.
Absolutely.
And today she's going to share with you her story of trauma, abuse, rejection, and finding her voice. If you're listening, have an open mind, and we hope you can learn something from this episode. Amanda, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me back, James. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back on. So, there's too much to cover from our last episode, so we're doing a separate one. So it's totally two different things. Yeah. So, we're going to start with, oh my God, sorry. Some water here. So we're going to start with a 1-for-1 game. Different questions this time, different words. So I'll give you a word and you say the first word that comes to your mind.
Okay.
So the first one is adventure.
Hiking.
Romance.
Relationships.
Volunteering.
Serving.
Saxophone.
Clarinet.
And the last one, shark.
Ocean.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you. So what is? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, before we get going, I'm just going to get you to read a passage from your book, if you don't mind. Your awesome book that I'm reading now, Silent No Longer. Yeah, there's a lot in this book. A lot. And I'm not a fast reader. I think I like to read, like when I'm reading a book, like I'll read a passage and then I'll stop and just think about it for a bit. Maybe that's why I'm a slow reader. So that's why it takes me so long to get through a book. But yes, I would just like you to read this on page 215. Just that middle passage, please, if you don't mind.
Okay. So I was terrified to face this painful truth that was hidden for over 3 decades. I can only remember a few little details of the sexual trauma, and there may have been other wounds, but this one shredded my entire heart as a little girl. It was hidden away into my subconscious for years. In this moment, I felt frightened, shocked, and full of heartache.
Thank you. I think that kind of, the reason why I got you to read that, because I think it speaks to anyone that's gone through what you've gone through, and that the pain stays there for decades until you're ready for it. So
Yeah.
yes, we're gonna kick off on our conversation, and we're just gonna start with. So, how was childhood for you? I know you've had it in your book, but I just like
Mhm.
to.
Sure.
So we're just
Yeah.
talking about it again.
Absolutely. Well, I honestly, when I look back, childhood was probably confusing because there were good things. There were good things that happened, happy memories, and things that seemed like good for, we went on family trips, but there are also hard things, like things that were full of trauma. And I always say that if each generation doesn't heal their trauma or deal with the emotions or seek help, because it's possible for people to get help before it becomes this way, either you carry over it. And so with my mom, I think was more empathetic, but she still had trauma, like I realized today, before she got more trauma in the marriage. And my dad had trauma, but he continued it. He continued patterns. So I grew up in a household that it was scary. I never knew what my dad would do. If it would be like my dad would be like kind or my dad would be yelling. And my dad, it was confusing because my dad would always be friendly outside the house, but then inside it was more anger. It was like that Jekyll Hyde type thing.
Mm,
And so, it was confusing. So I had a lot of good things, like where we went on family trips, but then I had a lot of, I would say, just not like healthy conversations or seeing healthy relationship between my mom and dad and seeing healthy relationships even between my siblings. And so it didn't I didn't understand that there were dysfunctional patterns in my life until later. I pretty much
mm,
didn't realize even till later, like that I was feeling so hurt and numb and like really had hid everything over the years. And it didn't help that in school, because I was so numb at home, I just wasn't myself and I had a lot of bullying there. So it was as if every place I went, there was no safety. And that little girl never felt safe ever. I mean, sometimes when I went to some places it felt more safe, but I feel like so many people were in trauma that there was like good things, but a lot of hard things. So I spent a lot of years of my life just confused and probably not feeling safe and trying to protect myself unknowingly
mm,
with unhealthy patterns.
mm. And you mentioned during that dysfunction, you kind of became more of a caregiver
Mhm.
to your siblings, as well as your mother. I think was kind of expecting you to know
Mhm.
more than you're ready to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my mom probably sought help at back in that time. It wasn't as we didn't have as many services. Even today, I think it's still scary when you have like any type of possible domestic abuse, right, or any type of abuse in the house. I feel like today people may be more vocal, but it's still not where I think it needs to be. But back then it was silent. Like people didn't want to get involved. People didn't know what to do. Church, house, family. So people just allowed whatever, right? No one really ever said anything. And so I think my mom, who was already had her trauma, just kind of shut down. And I think naturally, like part of my gifting is leadership. It's not that I'm like, ooh, but it's just part of who I am. And
Mm,
I think I realized later, like that is who I am. Like I'll just naturally just, take on things, but I don't want to take on everything. But I learned early, as you mentioned, to um like that I had to step up or I had to be an adult early. I had to figure things out. And I think definitely for my sister and brother, like at that time, I probably wasn't in a good place. So I probably
mm,
was more bossy and they see me as more bossy and, just not as nice. And I was really miserable. So I know that I probably wasn't as kind or like how I am today. Like there's been a lot of work, but I think also probably was a lot of resentment. Like I know there was, resentment that I had to take care of things or, things I didn't even realize, even when I was
mm,
in middle school, because I was already in my own state. But then, later when my mom had her own set of mental illnesses, probably from the abuse she endured, it just was hard because I was like, I already had my dad, like, who was struggling with his own addictions and drug stuff. And then I had my mom who shut down. So it was like, okay, and I'm a kid who was needing help, but my parents didn't realize it. So I think I had to sort of function in that. And that was really tough.
mm. And do you think, looking back now, the resentment that you had
Mhm.
for your siblings, not intentionally, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Do you think that was because the anger that you felt of what was happening, but you didn't really know what to do with what's happening?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I did, yeah, because when you're young and things happen, like the emotional abuse or different patterns, or again, as I uncover, like even sexual trauma that happened with and even there was a great uncle I kind of shared, but like just different stuff that happened at the hands of people that were supposed to take care of me. I think um, when it came to a lot of those trauma patterns, when we're young and we're kids and we're even like before even age 3 and even before I would say in our teenage years, we still don't have the language. We
No.
don't have language for trauma and feeling violated and unprotected and all of the emotions. And where people say resilience, I don't always like using that word because what happens is basically our brain goes numb. All of it goes into that subconscious, or you can even say unconscious, because you're literally, it's like you're like sleeping and like a walking dead with trauma at times, which I said in the beginning of the book. But it's a period of time where you just don't have the language and you're angry or you're confused and all these other things come in. And so for me, it really was it took time for everything to unlock that needed to unlock, that I needed to remember. And yeah, it was more, I didn't know the language. My sisters and brothers, like, we didn't know the language. We might have
Mm.
fought or been angry, but we didn't know why. We didn't know why. We were all so angry at times, or like if there
Yeah.
was jealousy, and or if my sisters were more angry at me because of what we'd been through. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. And was your father ever physical with the children?
My dad always said that he endured like a lot more of like emotional, physical abuse, that he wouldn't hit us. But what happened, and again, my mom, like back then, it was just that unfortunate codependency type thing going on. So if we would get in trouble with my mom, like she may, like maybe I pulled her hair, that kind of fun stuff. But she would always say, when your dad gets home,
Oh yeah.
like you might get hit. So that's like the worst thing ever, because you're waiting hours and it was horrifying. And I was always planning my escape, like, let me run away. But my dad would hit us at that point. But it was always scary because I would always think that my dad was going to hit me. Now sometimes he may, but like he had his hand like raised like he would. And there were times where like I felt like I used to run around the table just to avoid it. Like if he was really angry about something, like if we got in trouble. So I would say there was more of the emotional, physical abuse, or I mean, not physical. There was more emotional and verbal abuse that was
Mm.
happening that really tore me down. And in terms of the physical abuse, I would say it was not as much, but it still was scary because, like if I had to wait for punishment, that was not fun.
No, no, just that expression. Wait till your father gets home.
Yeah. I will not use that. I'm just saying I've learned I'm not using it.
Yeah, yeah, it's real. Like you start planning your escape.
You do, because you're like,
Yeah,
oh, heck. Yeah.
what would happen? And when did your abuse start? Like your sexual abuse? Was that from?
That
That's.
that that I think had started. So like, when I had this stuff uncovered, I believe God was just showing me there was just different people. Not everybody do I know, and that was like kind of after this book. But definitely I had a great uncle that when I was younger, I didn't realize. So I kind of, that was really the focus in here of this book. And so the great uncle, I just had like vague memories, and I was like, okay, am I going crazy? And so I really think it started like at age 3 or 4, like when I was younger. And like I remember going on some trips and I never put the pieces together. Even when I went to school, like when I was in kindergarten, I used to pee my pants, which sometimes people might, but like that's usually a sign. Like if you're like, I remember, I'm like, why am I peeing my pants? But like, and I remember like this one dream I had where I was in a crib, and then all of a sudden, and I think I was at this great uncle, I was like in my crib, 3 or 4, and I saw this person coming into the room, and that was it. It was like late at night, really dark, and I just remember standing up and someone coming in, but that was it. That's all I remember, and that really helped. I believe something happened, right? Because I have a blocked memory after that. Like someone was just coming in and that was it.
Mm,
And so I feel like it was early, early on. And it was, I didn't know, like Bessel van der Kolk, he has a great book called The Body Keeps Score. if it really talks about the brain and body disconnect. And so I think years later, when I did go out with that uncle, which I do talk about in my book, it's I wanted to address it. And it was awkward because this uncle would always like hit on me. It's kind of creepy, right? Like I'm like 10 or 11. He would try to like hit my like my butt, like at like parties, like who does that, right? Just really creepy stuff. And so, but no one really ever addressed that, right? Like this weird
Mm.
stuff.
Stuff. Yeah.
So, but I took him out actually. Like I didn't know what else to do. And when I got home, what was interesting is that my grandfather, like they knew him, and he left, he moved. And I was so disheartened, James, because it's like, what am I going to do? How am I going to address this? Because I really felt like, okay, either I'm going crazy or this really happened, right? That was where I was at this
Mm.
moment in life, before after I left Arizona to come back home. And so I went. He actually was home that week. I felt like it was a God like miracle. He was actually visiting Pennsylvania.
Mm.
So I
Mm.
called him up and he like came over the first day, and it was awkward because like I didn't want to sit by him. My brother like was by me, and then he like moved, and I hated that my brother moved. I couldn't tell my brother. And this guy sat by me and all this, and then he's like, "Oh, you should come down to Virginia." And like I was like, "Oh my goodness." So basically, then I ended up calling this guy again because I'm like, I need to say something. So he picked me up, which was
Mm.
interesting that I had him pick me up, and we went to this diner, and I somehow ate breakfast while he was talking to me and even like hitting on me, like during this time. And on the way back, I couldn't even muster the words, but my words were, I feel like something bad happened to me when I was a kid. And I feel like when he said, well, sometimes bad things happen, and, like the way that he said it. And I remember when he did that, and then he gave me this little teddy bear because he'd give me a big teddy bear when I was a kid, but he gave me this like teddy bear that says somebody loves you in Virginia. And I was like, okay, right. So I'm like,
Mm.
took it. But when I went in the house and up the stairs, and my dad was in a grumpy mood, I didn't care. I went upstairs, and as soon as I got to my old bedroom in my house, like I just wept. And that was when I knew that my body just knew. Like it was a confirmation that I didn't say the precise words of, well, you did this, but I said it in a way, and how he responded. It really, it hit me. And I knew that happened. And that was the example that Bessel van der Kolk says, that sometimes you could have a trigger or something
Mm.
happens. And I want to also say, not everybody may feel comfortable talking to your perpetrator, depending on who it is, because if you're not in a healthy, healed place. So I've had a lot of healing at that time. Well, I didn't actually, but I had started my journey, but he didn't say yes or no. He just said what he said. And that actually was what God used to help me realize that happened, that I wasn't going crazy. And it was the beginning of my revelations of what happened to me. But I want to say that not everybody is it healthy. And that's even in research and books, that like, if you haven't had healing, or depending on where you're at in your stage of your journey of healing, if you go to your perpetrator and they say no, or they say, they deny it, that could totally throw you back. Now, for
Mm.
me, now in this case, what God used that as, this was the place where I needed confirmation, and he used it to help me really feel that deeply, and realize I wasn't going crazy, that things had happened, but God was starting to reveal why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And so that was huge for me. So, and again, everything was stemming from childhood trauma. And I believe this completely. I believe that everything that happens to us, if we don't address those events, those perceptions of feelings, and they're not released, will impact us in adulthood. And
Mm.
so it's so important to know that, because it can impact your very identity of who you believe you are, based on what happened to you and all of those events. So I'm a big proponent of actually handling that childhood trauma deeply, even though not everybody does. But to me, that's what I do as a
Mm.
coach, and that's and it's a process. It's a process. It's not overnight.
No.
And so I also want to add that too.
Yeah. And did you ever speak to your family about it? And did they believe you?
I did share with my sister and brother first, just because there were different things that happened. And I just, as a result of that, because like when you've had something happen to you, often like that might happen, like where like you're acting things out, or different things
Mm.
happen. Like, or like, so I feel like I shared that with my family, And I mean, I think like for my sister and brother, like they were supportive. My mom was kind of like, well, I don't remember anybody like being near you. And again, like I don't think my mom recognized like she was dealing with her own stuff. So it's kind of hard
Mm.
to even realize any of those situations. And I think for my dad, he was quiet. And I think really in terms of all that, it's just different because not everybody knows how to handle that. And depending if that's happened
No.
to other people or if their family said, nope, you don't talk about it, it's kind of like an unspoken thing. So I think that's part of what happens is that as you're uncovering these things, unfortunately, not everybody is trauma informed trained or people, families don't know what to say. And so that was an interesting journey because you don't always remember things. So I was starting to get those pieces. But remember, like when you're uncovering dysfunction, it's not always easy to talk
No.
about or discuss.
No. And the people you talk to, if they're not ready to hear it, they will,
Hmm.
you probably come out of it feeling worse because they'll probably blame you or deny what happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
say, are you sure that that happened? And
Mm.
again, that's where it's important when you're in the healing journey to know, like who to talk to, hopefully safe people. And even for myself, I think I've even had some blogs on talking about like what happens if a child talks to you. And I'm also in the process of writing some, I believe, trauma informed books to help families, to help, relatives, to help children actually share
Mm.
what might
Mm.
happen so that we can really uncover it. So be on the lookout in the next 3 to 5 years for
Yeah. Yeah.
the
I'll
different
definitely
books.
keep a
Yeah.
lookout for that. And you mentioned from everything that was happening, you experienced a lot of rejection and
Hmm.
you became a people pleaser, for a better word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I have different responses like I did in the past, like fight, flight, right? Fight was more, I was actually more of a flight person. Some people are fight. I was
Mm.
more of a flight response. That tends to be sort of what I do at times. But the fawning was a thing that I used to do. I think the fawning and the flight was kind of how I responded. The fear where you freeze. I don't know that I always did that. And the fight means like I will like if there's something with somebody else or whatever, like I may be one that would take care of it, right? So, but if it's
Mm.
for me, I think if it's something towards me, I think that my biggest one was that flight or the fawning. And so
Mm.
fawning when you're people pleasing, when you kind of go with things, but it might not be what you really want. And so, yes, I used to do a lot of people pleasing because I didn't really feel loved, which is interesting because my name is Amanda, which means worthy of love. My whole name is pretty fun, but that is the big thing that was attacked most of my life. But that's my heart. Now I know who I am and I know that I'm worthy of love. And I can say I'm worthy of love and then not be like in a pile of tears. But when it comes to and my passion is for people to know they're worthy of love because that's the biggest thing. To start your
Mm.
healing process, you need to actually receive healing to know that it's safe to receive love, to then feel love, that to then actually love. Um, so yeah, so sorry. So with that, I think there was just a lot of people pleasing because I didn't feel loved, and I'm like, I have to perform, or I have to please, or I have to do something great for other people for me to be loved. Like I couldn't just be loved no matter what for who I was, no matter what I looked like, no matter what
Mm.
I did. I had to perform. So I had that in my head. I had to be perfect. I had to perform to be loved, and that is how I did all these things to achieve. High achiever. High achievers
Mm.
often don't feel loved and they feel like they have to perform to be loved. And so I was doing all this stuff just to have positive
Be.
stuff happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And to soothe yourself or to escape from the feeling of the unworthiness that you're feeling around this time. And
Hmm.
you mentioned that you turn to food as for
Hmm.
comfort.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that you did. Yeah.
Hmm. Yes. And I think even early on, because depending on the person, but I think if you're not protected and you don't feel protected, for me, it was a way to hide. Like I went into hiding probably early on. And so because there were so many attacks on me, and it really, to me, even anything to do with like food, it's also a form of self-harm. Like there's so many things that
Mm,
be a form of self-harm. Like there's thousands of things that could be a form of self-harm, and even the ways that we think it's self-protection, but it's really self-harm. And so I did that because I needed to hide. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel comfortable, even in groups, actually. But as I continued the healing journey, I realized that there were other reasons why. But yes, I turned to food to protect me, to keep me safe. So that was my thought, that it would be keeping me safe or
mm,
comfort pain, because there was so much pain that it was just easier to do that than like feel uncomfortable, feel rejected, all that stuff. Even though it
mm.
didn't feel good afterwards, like all the patterns of eating, I dealt with all disorders in my life.
Yeah. And do you think with eating disorder, I know people looking outside will just think eating disorder is something that people choose
Mm.
to become. Obviously, it's not the case.
Yeah, no, it's linked to mental health, and there's different research that shows like whether it be binge eating or throwing up and puking kind of stuff, or even anorexia, like where you're withholding. So anorexia, like, when I think about my time when I did that in college, it was more of a control thing because nothing I could control in my life. So I was just dealing with that. And not everybody has gone through sexual trauma that has that. I think generations past, if they had sexual trauma, it could impact people who didn't have it now. But there
Mm,
could be like feelings of not feeling good enough or perfection that lead to that. But a lot of times there's sexual trauma involved, especially for people who are compulsive eating. There's a lot of sexual trauma involved because they're trying to hide, they're trying to be protected. They feel horrible about themselves. They feel like they deserve it. It's harming themselves because they've already been harmed. So they're like, why not? Um, Bulimia, it's almost like you're trying to get out your emotions. You just don't know how.
mm,
So I have bulimia,
mm,
and it was interesting. That was a short stint, but when I had that, it was just my way of, oh, I could just do that. I could eat and then I could just throw it all up, or and I think for during that time, I didn't know what to do with the emotions. They were too big. And so I did that. So, and then just the body dysmorphic, like even when I had like, done all this stuff, it was confusing. Like if people said you look good, then I was like, oh, like I wasn't looking good a minute ago. So then I need to keep going. And so it was really unhealthy because just even having any type of saying stuff about your body, it could go either way. It could lead you back
mm,
into more anorexia. It could lead you into other patterns of eating. So for me, that's what happened, because like I couldn't process it. I had like the ABCDs, I call it, of it. I had all of them. So yeah, and it's definitely with mental health, but it's because something's happened in our lifetime, or we feel like we have to be a certain way. That's perfection, performance, or abuse of any kind, or anything that we think is wrong with us can lead to those disorders.
mm, mm. Thank you. And when you when you entered into relationships
Mhm.
from your book, it sounds like you met a lot of emotional unavailable men.
Yes, 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 I did. Yes, I did. I did, and I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it during, because um, you just don't know. And I think like it was interesting because if I had people that were sort of available, like there were some people that like seemed really great, even in college, and I'd run away. I'm like, okay, like this person wants to buy me flowers and a book. Like I'm horrified, right? Like it was so scary. I'm like, I don't know what that looks like. So you tend to go to the pattern that you're used to until you know better. And so I would go to all these people that probably weren't the best people, but I was trying to seek their love. But again, that goes back to your childhood parents.
Mm,
It really does. It goes back to, well, you're still seeking, and it sounds weird to say, but it is. It's like you're seeking love, and and we get shaped by our family patterns, but you're seeking love. Now, if you have a healthy attachment and you have healthy stuff, then like you might seek people that are healthy, not like that they're your dad or mom. So not saying that, like not totally Freud, like I'm not Freud, but I'm saying when you have healthier childhood or you're healing from that, you tend to have, we tend to just go after the patterns we see. And even if they're healthy or not, every family has stuff. So it's like
mm,
important to know that. But for me, I tended to not realize that I was going after people that weren't treating me well, or like I kind of knew, but I was used to it. And that took a long time until I started to get healthy myself and like actually know what I deserve. And sometimes emotionally unavailable men, like, were, it was just safer. It was safer
mm,
because and I wasn't even either, because I think, and it's a good point that one of my friends, she has some great revelations about this, but I agree, is that I wasn't emotionally available either because I had all this pain. So I wasn't in my best emotionally available place, nor were the people. Although like some of that
Yeah.
there was abuse. So it was a two-way street in a lot of ways where if you're with somebody like that, you don't even realize that there's unhealthy things in you because why would I even be with them in the first place? Like what was that? What was I allowing? Why was I
Mm.
allowing that treatment and why was I ignoring the red flags? And so I think today now, and people be like, oh, well, you have to like rush into things. I think now I know, like when that happens, like it'll be in a different place and I'll be in a different place.
Yeah.
Um, but it is important to know, like I'm always, there's going to be ongoing healing, but I know differently what, who I am and what I carry and like what I want versus just kind of going with people just to go with people or thinking it's great, kind of really understanding what that looks like, not being
Mm.
emotionally available now. Yeah.
Mm. So unconsciously around that time, you're looking for approval from people, maybe, and for people to just love you, but it just
Mhm.
happened to be now most like any relationship at the start of great, and if there's dysfunction underneath, that eventually starts to come out.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. And I think before my approach now is way different. I was like a
Mm.
very different place and I have very different values. So for me, I feel like it's like where I may have had like 20 million options. I could still, but I have it's narrowed because of who I am, my own personal beliefs and I think also like where I'm at and what I want in my life. So that really narrows it down in a good way.
Mm.
Knowing that because I'm a person of faith and I believe that's important to me. And I also feel like just even like my own personal convictions, like it's important to have someone again. Like I feel like it's like Amos, like two people can't walk ahead if they're in completely different
Yeah.
beliefs are completely, and some people believe that. Now some of you watching, that's okay with you, but for me, I want someone that's like-minded and like walking towards the same goal and like and belief, meaning like and even how to treat each other, but also like the things that I'm called to, right? I need,
Mm.
you want someone that has that support that's going that way too. So
Mm. Mm.
yeah.
And so I wrote a question here. Which number was it? Sorry. Sorry. Let me start again. Your healing journey.
Mhm.
Um, did that start from? I think you mentioned in the book about a healing journey, that class that you attended, and that kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah, but I would say my healing journey actually began, I think, just because I didn't know, even though it wasn't as intensive, my healing journey really began after I left my house, for college, even though I've come back, but I didn't realize at first that when I went there, like a lot of the guys, like they didn't say things to me that I was hearing at home. And I think that first year afterwards, I was angry. I kind of talked about that, but I was angry. And I knew I was angry at my dad, but I didn't know why. And it was because I realized, oh my gosh, like I don't have that treatment there. And that was where I started to unravel that. Even though I was kind of going into other stuff during that time. And then I would say, yeah, then I think in my early 20s, like when I went out to Arizona, it was like meeting with friends, I still was dealing with things. And I feel like when I came back at age 26, I started to unravel. It
Mm.
just took me in my 20s, I started to unravel like some of the sexual abuse, the revelations that help. And then I think there was more pain because I was in relationships and just kind of doing stuff that, again, added trauma responses. And then I would say, yeah, in the past, I would say like 11 years have been a deeper and intent, more intent. In the last 5 have been really intensive in terms of my healing, my intentional healing, and just unraveling things that really, really unraveling things. They're not triggers. So whenever there is a trigger, I realize what else is going on, right? Why am I responding higher at a higher
Mm.
intensity? And even like it was interesting because like like when our family gets together, sometimes because my sister and brother, like when we're not always home, even though like we'll talk, but when we're together, because like I'm here, I'm like more closer to home. We've had talks about this. They're not. So it's like it unravels. Like they come back to things they haven't dealt with. And so that can be intensive. And then at some point I end up like getting tired, and then I like have a trigger because I'm like, oh man, right? So then I'm like, okay, what's going on? And so that's my big question always is, what am I still dealing with? Like, what do I need to release? Why am I responding this way? Um, so yeah, and the healing classes was a deeper part. Like that was I think 6 or 7 years ago. So that was a deeper start to
Mm,
my journey to really untangle beliefs I had about myself, beliefs of where I thought I was and where I really was, and to really help me understand what I was believing. Because a lot of times when we're in a wounded place, we lead with our feelings and not our actual beliefs. So we take our feelings as facts, and even in counseling, my feelings aren't facts. But in our society, I really actually think that we say that, but we don't follow through with that. We think our feelings are facts, and they're not.
mm, mm. And your trip to Haiti?
Yeah.
Yes, that was quite interesting.
Yes, my trip to Haiti. That was interesting because I still was not, and I didn't know my giftings. I didn't know, very sensitive to land and shifting to different places. And because of all the stuff that happened to me and the trauma, it was really interesting. I had no idea that I'd respond that way, but it really was a time where I literally felt like God was calling me because I went. I didn't even ask him to go, but he protected me. And I realized like he was just wooing me back to him. And I left there with like more joy. And he was savior, but he was Lord when I left, and I think that was, he drew me closer because when you go through trauma, like you also don't realize why you weren't protected. And a lot of times it's healing from, sometimes we get offended at God, Jesus, or Holy Spirit. Now I'm a believer in the Christian faith, but I didn't realize it because a lot of the stuff I was going through, God revealed later, was a lot of times we don't feel safe because we're like, why didn't someone protect me? Especially if it
Mm,
wasn't my family. Why didn't God protect me? Why didn't Jesus protect me? So we it's almost like I had to heal knowing that Jesus, God, and Holy Spirit are all safe, and it really went God, then it went Jesus, then it went Holy Spirit. And knowing that they're all safe, the Trinity, and that I see all the time in coaching women and even men and children. Like it's when you've had abuse, knowing that they're safe and reestablishing safety takes time. It takes time to unlock our and not self protect.
mm, mm. You mentioned during your trip to Haiti, I think something happened in one of the rooms where everyone was praying, and I think the priest asked a question or something. Tell us about
Yeah.
that.
Yes, I had done a baptism, but when I was there, and there's, I think somebody else too that might have gone forward, but I was really struggling. And I feel like all week God was wanting me to like just really, I was struggling because I knew him, but it was part of my journey where they're like, well, I think there's still someone that needs to call Jesus Lord. And I was a leader. And I didn't realize it, but I just fell down weeping that I I felt like there was such condemnation. So even though there's a cross in all of my life, a lot of times when you have trauma and abuse, there's sin, condemnation, and shame cycles. So I felt like I had to work and perform what Jesus already did for me, that what his blood already covered. And so at that moment, I bowed down and said, Jesus Christ is Lord and King and my Savior, not just my Savior, but he's my Lord, like of my life, and that I'm willing to serve him. And I felt like in that moment, it was a beautiful, like just that I was loved because I was in such a weird, awful state. Like I literally, like it was a bad, like I was like, I feel like that was the moment where God just scooped me up in his hand and said, I have you, and I'm
Mm,
going to continue to heal you, and you're going to be who you're called to be. Because, I definitely have heard many a times that I could have not been here anymore. But because like God's mercy, here I am, to share my story, to bring many people to know that God is good and Jesus is good, even in all this stuff. And he never intends for people to be hurt. A lot of people have free will, but he never intends that. He wants us to heal from trauma, and it's not. And that was hard for me to realize. So there's whole story on that, James. But basically it took a lot. But God's still good, and I still know that because of what he's done in my life and the hand he's had in my life, even through this journey.
yeah. Now, sorry. It When you say a hard lot to realize, do you mean like you're questioning the faith, or were you just questioning yourself?
I think it was more, yeah, I think it was more like I knew of God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, but I was scared, and they were more like I intellectualized them, like they were more like in the book. It
Mm,
really God had to teach me. He's like, well, no, I still heal, I still deliver, I still save, I'm like actually a living God. I'm not like far, far away, and I actually do protect you, and like and I think even with that, so that's what I mean. So during this, like when you've been through intensive complex trauma, it's hard to have safety with anybody, and then it's like you're
mm,
trying to then envision yourself being safe with God, and sometimes you say that but you're actually not believing it. And that was my journey.
mm,
Like I said I felt safe, but I didn't always, because I felt this pain and I had this violation, and it was very confusing. So I had to relearn that God is safe, that Jesus is safe, and Holy Spirit, that they're not going to hurt me, that He's the God of protection. And as I continue to be with Him, no matter what. So yeah, I think that was really in Haiti. He was really like bringing me back into relationship, and that God was safe, and that
mm,
He was protecting me. So really, that was the big thing that happened for me.
So you had to change your mindset from just thinking, from having the idea that Jesus and God, and actually believing it. That
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that they protect you. And again, like depending on the abuses, because there's very different kinds of abuses, and especially sexual trauma, you might think
Mm,
that some people are dealing with that, in their households, or like with other people, or like family or cousins or whatever, and they're crying out to Jesus, and He never comes to save them, and that's their mindset. So then how can you, right? So if you have that belief because no one protected you, then it's like you're undoing that, and God's like undoing that as you're going through this, and then He shows you. Because like the biggest thing for me, and this might be for people, again, everybody is different on a different
mm,
journey, but for me, I was like, well, Jesus, how could you just stare, like how could you just be in the room and weep? Like I just, like, to me, that's what I had. And then there was a time where Jesus showed me that He was actually taking the abuse with me, He was covering me. And so when He showed me that, it changed everything. And I realized, wow, He took it all, like not just on the cross, but He took that in that moment with me. And
mm,
he actually, everything that I had experienced, He was there with me. And I needed to understand that, like, He had taken all of it when He said all is all. And that to me changed everything. He wasn't just far, far away. He actually was there, and He had His hand on my life, and He protected me the whole, like He was protecting me, and He
mm,
took it too. And I think realizing like a God that would take everything with you, and then help you get through your healing, to me, that it changed everything. I realized that He wasn't distant. He actually wanted to be there, and He wanted people to make different choices, but that He was willing to help me heal.
mm, mm. 'Cause you mentioned a part of your book with your father when he overdosed. Now he didn't really believe in God, but it was only when he was in a bad place that he actually asked for prayer.
Yeah, and I had been praying for my dad a long time, and every time I talk about it, he was just like angry, because there was just a lot of drugs and alcohol. And even though I wasn't completely right, like I always had this faith. I always went to church. I always had this connection. But again, in that moment, God, I didn't realize I intercede. I do a lot of prayer, and so God was just showing me. And my dad, when I think he could have died that day, but I just knew to pray, and I prayed with him, and he got like that strength that was God, it was Jesus
Mm,
healing him, but just praying for him, and he was able to sleep that off. And then I think a week or so later, he was going around churches, and I think that was God like bringing him into a new place where he actually started to read the Bible, and God was like awakening him to like his actual like identity again, because anything abuse confuses us in our identity. It just
mm,
confuses who we
totally.
are. And so my dad, I think, started to come around. Now he's still, was healing. And the thing is, like, when you're not taught, like, there's a generational gap, because now there's a lot more people talking about it that are younger, but then you have older people that were always told don't talk about it, just
Hmm,
slide under the rug. So now we have this generation where not everybody can talk, because some people are like, well, it's done with, but that's not it. Like it's now time that we're talking about it. So a lot of older people in their 60s, 80s, even though it's all that, because I'm doing like counseling degree, a lot of people when they're older, it's harder for them to get help because they were never told to get help. And they were told, like, I've even had friends in their 50s, 60s that are 60s that were like slapped across the face when they talked about it, because they're like, no, we don't talk about that. It didn't happen. So it's very confusing when you have people that
Mm.
are older that were told don't talk about it. So they think we shouldn't talk about it because that's what they were taught as a pattern. And today we're saying, no, it's time to talk about it. It's important to get this out and get healing. So um, you have this conflict and this confusion with
Push and
generations.
pull. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, yeah, they were raised with we don't talk about anything like that. And that's the
Oh,
way it is. That's the way it
hmm
is. So,
yeah. hmm
yeah. And when you say finding your voice, how did that look like for you when
That was
you eventually started to speak up? I'm sure it wasn't easy.
Yeah, I think that it was, yeah, I think it was like hidden, really. Like I had my voice hidden. And so it took time for me to really identify the things that happened where I stopped speaking, or even in school where I didn't defend myself, or I didn't speak up, or I didn't share how I really felt, or even be myself. Like I just was like whatever people wanted me to be. And I was so mad because I was voted most shyest in like my senior year. And it wasn't me. I was like, I just didn't talk to people because there's so
that's
much
not
stuff going
that's
on.
not good award to win.
I know I was annoyed, but I'm like, you know what, fine. But it wasn't me. But I was in that part because I didn't really have people that were safe or like friends. But I think as I started to like people knew I was a leader when I was in college. I was a resident assistant and I had those leadership skills. And I started to talk to people then. I started to come out of my shell. I started to be like who I really wanted to be and always dreamed to be. And I think as I continued, I started to realize how to communicate instead of having passive aggressive stuff, because I was taught not to share anything. Or even when I would talk with, my dad when I was younger, trying to defend myself or defend things, my dad would always tell me to shut up, right? Like shut up, shut up, shut up, be quiet. And I felt like even as I was getting ready towards my book, because it was more intensive, like my dad would try to be like, no, you have to be silent. I'm like, no, I'm never going to be silent again. And actually my necklace here, I had a friend give me, it says silence with a line through it,
Mm.
um, because yeah, it took time, but now I feel like whether I'm speaking on behalf of like sharing my story, or advocating for other people, no matter how scary it might be, because I know in my field, I'm in education and I have my degree in counseling, but I have deeper again, everybody has different things that come, but I have understanding of things that have impacted children. And I have a passion, to help people know who they are. I'm a breakthrough coach, but really identity coach. So really helping people know who they are and the different things that have impacted them in childhood and across their lifetime that has shaped who they are today. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're responding out of their traumas. And so helping them do that takes some time, but
Mm.
I'm passionate about it. So yeah. So basically, with my voice, it's like speaking on behalf of and advocating like for people, and also speaking on behalf for like what's gone through for me, and helping many people understand that it's possible to heal, it's possible to change, it's possible to shift how you think, it's possible to have a completely different lifestyle in terms of like whether it be your health or anything, because as you shift and as you realize what impacted you and that heals, then your brain can shift day by day, and you can have a new life, because my life is completely different and it's continuing to grow. And I feel like this is a big year for me to really, as I'm shifting out of all the hard old stuff, and I know that I don't look like anything I've been through. And that has been amazing, because I've had people share, because I've had other counselors when I've done different groups, and they're like, I don't even see that, because sometimes I can tell when people have been through trauma. And I still believe I'm not arrived, but it feels great to know that completely. I know that I probably would have been identified with different mental health things at a serious level when I was younger. And I don't have that. I
Mm.
have a peace of mind. I don't have the racing thoughts. I don't have the fractures I used to. But I'm still continuing to heal, but I'm completely different with my mind because
Mm.
of the healing
Yeah.
I've done. And I don't say that with arrogance. I say that because I'm really grateful, but I also have a lot of compassion, because I know that every person's in a different place in their journey, and I know completely what it's like to be in that place. And but I also want to offer that there's a lot of hope. I didn't know there was a lot of hope until the last especially 5 years, and especially the last 1 or 2. And this year was the most freeing year, where I started to know who I was and just really had that congruence of my mind, heart, soul, congruence
Mm,
of my thinking. And I completely thankful.
mm, mm. And for anyone that experienced sexual abuse, like who
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't know where to start, because like with it comes a lot of shame, and especially if
Mm-hmm.
you're carrying it for most of your life, and like what do you say to people like that?
Yeah, I think the first
Mm,
thing is it's not your fault, and shame makes us think that it's our fault. That and it's not. It's not your fault. You didn't deserve it, and I'm sorry that happened. First, that there's nothing wrong with you. It's something that happened to you. That's what we say during trauma informed, and that if you don't have people that you feel safe talking to, there are different numbers. There are different hotlines. I think even like the child abuse hotline, mental health. If you look and you can call people. There's like NAMI, which is National Association for Mental Health or Mental Institute, and there's different places that if you call, at least they can talk to you and then give you some more resources. If you have a safe friend or a trusted friend, you can share with them. Obviously, if you're young, like if you're under a certain age and you're really not an adult, then that's important, because if you are sharing that with adults, know that we have to, there's mandated reporters, again, depending on countries, but usually, like even where I live, that there's mandated reporters. So if you are sharing it, it's not that we're wanting to get people in trouble, but it's important to report that because something happened to you and you're young and it shouldn't have happened, and not to be afraid. But that may happen if you speak that to somebody, because whenever we share something like that, it's important to get that help. So I would say again, seeking out a safe person. if you are an
mm,
adult, if you are an adult, having that safe person, talking with them, and then also seeking out other numbers if you want it more private, different hotlines to just check in, and definitely with that comes counseling. Counseling is a way, and they're different. Hopefully, I know that there are different ways that sometimes insurance covers it, or again, if you are trying to get those resources or plugged in with those different hotlines, because they can help at least talk through or find some different support groups for you, because going through that and healing, it's always better with community and other people that might say they can understand and have compassion.
mm, mm. And would you advise anyone now when you're going through this, you don't necessarily have to confront your abuser?
Yes, you don't have to confront your abuser, and I would say um, unless you're in a great space. So, like I've read a lot of books, especially even with Judith Herman. She has a book, on recovering. That's an older book. If you some people had talked to their abuser and they denied it, and they said that all this stuff, and
Mm,
the person thought, okay, maybe they would say yes, and it put people back, it set them back because they're in a different place in their journey. And so know that it's hard because you want to confront it, but sometimes it might not be a good time, or sometimes it's hard to accept, but sometimes you just are not going to share it because they might not be in a healthy place. It might be a dangerous thing for you to do.
mm,
So just know that sometimes you won't be able to confront the abuser. Not saying that you can't, but using wisdom or like talking with other people who might, as you go through the process, right? Because sometimes that's important, so that you have wise counsel. And again, that might be with counselor or somebody else, because if you're sharing information, like the more they know, they can assess whether that person may or may not be in a good place, or and also assessing where you are. Because if you're not in a good place, meaning like you're having a lot of hard times, a lot of anxiety, really stressed out, you're going through the post-traumatic stress disorder. And so if you're in a state where you're really in the beginning parts of that, it could put you back. Um,
mm,
Meaning like it could get worse with that, rather than like a place of relief or something that's going to help you move ahead. So definitely, talk to counselors, talk to safe people. Having that wise counsel will help you make a decision. And definitely, if you're in the beginning parts of it, it may not be helpful. It might actually be worse for you at first. So you really want to assess where you're at before you would do
mm,
that.
mm. Yeah, so yeah, everyone's journey is different, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not a straight road. There's a lot of
Yeah.
forward and backward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. And how's your relationship now with your parents?
I think I'm definitely on a journey with my mom. Like I had to uncover because sometimes when you've had like different abuse and I was a lot. I'm the oldest, so I was really angry at my mom a lot. Again, not for many different reasons, but I think because like she stayed or like I had to be an adult, and also like just upset because I'm like, okay, like here we were in this environment. So I really had a lot of anger. And they said that that's not abnormal. Like you might have more anger towards like one parent versus another. And I couldn't
Mm,
uncover my anger towards my dad as much. I do have that, right? And then it's also confusing because of maybe like tactics that are used by abusers. So I really had to uncover that. And then with my dad, I have a lot of boundaries up. Because my dad is, because when you have family, and again, if they don't choose to get help or seek help, or like they don't think they need help, I'm wanting to continue to on my journey. And so I've had to put up boundaries where I just wouldn't see him at the house. I would see him out to dinner. I wouldn't go over. I've had to leave the house when he gets angry because he hasn't dealt with things. So I have boundaries up, and I continue to do that because it's healthy for myself, and it's not to harm him, but it's like I can have empathy for him, but I need to have empathy for myself because I'm also healing. And so I can have
mm,
empathy for his life and things. But if he's choosing not to get help, and that's what I told him recently, I'm like, if you're choosing not to get help, that's your choice. But I also have a choice to be around you or not. And I'm not always feeling safe. And so I'm going to choose not to come over because I don't feel safe.
mm.
So I'm
Totally.
very
Yeah.
vocal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. And even that process could be difficult, especially when it's with your
Mm-hmm.
parent,
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's,
Yeah.
and sorry, a couple of more questions. What's your favorite Bible verse?
Well, I have a bunch, but actually, my one that I feel like God kept me at was Proverbs 3:5-6, which is trust in the Lord with all of your heart, lean not in your own understanding. In all of your ways, acknowledge him, and he will guide your paths. So I really feel like in my life, I've had to learn how to retrust God, Jesus, and Holy Spirit.
Mm,
And he continues to be faithful in showing me that he's in my life and that I can trust him, which is part of the huge journey. Because that's relationship. If you can't trust, then you're not really in relationship. So that was a big verse that I've used, and that has been like even a verse like, with my name. So it's a meaningful one that I have memorized.
There's one on. I haven't gone through all of them, but there's one on. Let me just try and find it. Page 147, and Psalm 34:18. Um, that says, sorry.
No, you're okay.
Oh my god, am I looking at the wrong thing? Sorry.
It's
Page
okay.
147. And I knew that God was near me because he's close to the brokenhearted.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I really
Yeah.
like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yep. That was, yeah. Psalm 34. Yeah. Psalm 34 is actually a meaningful psalm for me, but yes, he is. And I think that's actually a big point is that what I've realized, and this is hard for a lot of people, but it's kind of like Mary with the alabaster jar when she poured it out, she wept at Jesus' feet and after he had healed her, and she had no shame and she was at him. And that's pretty much what the posture that God wants for us. And like so many times we try to just act like we got together, but what she was showing there was she had no shame, because that's in the garden we started to have shame. So she came right to Jesus with no shame, broken. And our 100% brokenness is how God can 100% fill us and with his light and his love, because we are so like my 100% weakness, my 100% brokenness. So I've learned that the more broken, the weeping, the grief that I actually display, which I never had done, like God'll, I never know what he's
Mm,
going to have to do when I'm speaking, but he wants us to be in that posture. So we're a house of joy as much as a house of mourning. And so when we're able to come to him like that, he can meet us and he can actually help us and heal us, because we're coming in a posture of humility and knowing that we're brokenhearted without him and we need him. So that's a very important verse for me, knowing that it's okay to do that and it's okay to have emotions and express how I'm feeling, because God can handle it. And we're not cursing ourselves by saying how we feel,
mm,
because he can hear all of our inner thoughts. So I'm like, okay, and he taught me that a long time ago. When I was angry, I had to just share it, and then I had peace. And I looked around, and I was like, "What? I just told you I was angry at you." Like, and but that's a relation. Like, he's like, "We already know." So it's us expressing that so he can heal it, and then we can actually, talk with him. That's walking in the garden side by side and saying, "This is how I'm feeling," and that's the relationship God wants with us. Yeah,
Definitely. Before asking my last two questions, I'm going to ask you to read another passage, if you don't mind, from your book. And this one is on page, not 147, because I was on that, sorry. 196.
Okay.
So this is the bold text on 196, and then I'll ask you my final two questions. Please.
Yeah, this is, sure. And this was a big passage that I had, but I said, "I never said you are beautiful, although it was what you desired most, to be called beautiful, to be loved and cherished, to be heard, to be known, to be seen."
Yeah, I just thought it was beautiful. and I think that's what every child wants.
Yeah, I think so. And that's what God wants. Yeah. I think that we all do. So it's interesting because, and that, so look, it's very different when we realize that we are.
Super. And my final two question is, what does well-being mean to you?
What is what? I'm sorry.
Well-being.
Well-being.
Yeah. What does it mean to you?
Right. What does it mean to you? Okay. So I think it means taking care of yourself in many different ways. So it's a whole picture. I think it's mind, body, soul, spirit. It's like the whole thing. So like our emotions, our physical, our spiritual, and the internal, like our internal out. So internal meaning like us knowing we're loved, that we're valued, that we're worthy, us knowing that we are good enough, like really going through all those beliefs. And when we actually are being, like when we know who we are without any validation from anybody else, then who we are leads into what we do. So when we know who we are and we actually believe that we're worthy and full of value, then we're going to treat ourselves that way. We're going to treat others that way. And then we're going to take care of ourselves in every area and continue to grow and nourish that way, right? It's almost like a tree always brings life and grows, and it protects or covers. So like we start to grow and we become the healthy version of ourselves in all aspects, but it's really inside out. So inside is the huge part that leads to the outside.
Fantastic. And my final question, what's one thing you're proud of?
I'm proud of learning how to change and learning how to express myself and learning how to release emotions. I think everything, and just really, and the biggest thing is I'm really proud to know that I love myself and that I'm valuable. After all these years, I think that all came with the healing and the release. So that is a big deal for me. And so it's more of the internal work that I've done than any achievement that I've ever done.
Definitely. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I don't know. So is it okay if I show the book? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have my copy here.
Oh, you do? Yeah. So it's called Silent No Longer, Finding My Voice After Complex Trauma, Dr. Amanda Helman. And definitely it's my journey up until 2019, but I released this book in November 26th of 2021. But it definitely was my journey through 2019. And there's probably going to be other books at some point about the rest of the revelations. But yeah.
There's
there's
a lot of honesty on that book. Yeah.
It's pretty honest. Yeah.
If you enjoyed today's episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a quick review on my Facebook page, Don't Be Afraid to Talk, or DM me on Instagram. The show notes will include all of the relevant links from today's episode. If you haven't already, please download, leave a rating, and share with your friends. You might just reach that person who needs to hear this message. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. I am James Lumumba, signing off with gratitude.